Everyone, thank you for joining February's Thought Leadership webinar. Excited today to be joined by Josh Moore, one of our solution architects. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Jeff.
Obviously, an important topic. We have a big group of people that have shown up this morning with frigid cold and snow, depending on where you're at, to hear more about building out a cybersecurity roadmap. I think through all of our coffee break series and our thought leadership, cybersecurity has tended to be one of the most attended topics that we have presented, and today is no different. So, Josh, I think you've got a lot of good content to share, a lot of stuff that you're going to take everyone through. But like we try to do with any of our educational opportunities, is make sure that we have the availability and the ability for people to ask questions so that you can answer. So please use the Q&A section of Zoom. If you kind of hover over this PowerPoint slide down at the bottom, there's a Q&A icon. Drop your question in that. I'll be watching that queue and interrupting Josh to get the questions asked and then hopefully answered as we go through. And at the end, we're going to do a little bit of a survey, have a QR code that we'll have you scan to give us some more input and some opportunities to engage if some of this content is appropriate for you and timely, and we can begin to help you with that. So, Josh, with all of that, I'm going to let you take it away to tell us a little bit more about the critical importance of getting your arms around cybersecurity and how to build that into a long-term roadmap.
Of course, Jeff. Thank you for the handoff. Really appreciate it. First of all, again, Josh Moore, I'm a senior solution architect with Levity. I do a good deal of our security assessment work and assisting our customers across the finish line. Well, we're always chasing that finish line. It's a never-ending journey, but assist them with remediation of their security issues. So first of all, I want to thank everybody that's attending today on the thought leadership session. My hope is that you'll find this presentation informative and help you down the path of improving your organization's security posture. Let's start off by taking a look at the challenges that businesses are facing nowadays. So with business and cybersecurity challenges, it's an ever-evolving threat landscape. The threat actors abroad are getting better at leveraging AI tools, utilizing automation, right? It used to be, a guy behind a keyboard that was, manually trying to find attack vectors and executing on those. Those days are long gone, and there's a Cold War brewing of, ever-evolving AI tools that these hackers are using, combined with security tools being manufactured that can counteract them. So another challenge that we're facing, especially in COVID, is our users now demand more access to data, application, business assets, right? And they want to be able to access that from their own devices, mobile devices, obviously their laptops and whatnot. How are we protecting those various devices that they want to have access to? Another challenge that businesses are facing when they're trying to take their cybersecurity journey and improve are finding cybersecurity professionals, right? There's a good amount of skills gaps from where organization need those security experts to be able to address both the breadth and depth of challenges that an organization faces. And those resources for, smaller, medium-sized business, SMB, mid-market, not only can they be challenging to find, but they can be quite expensive to hire. And then, just some of the trends that are happening now that we're starting to see. 5G being implemented in cell phones means that, these hackers have the ability to be able to more quickly hack into phones, which has a lot of our ID information. Quite often we're running authenticator apps, banking apps, everything like that. So, I do think some of these future challenges will involve mobile devices. As well as, as organizations are moving out to the cloud, there's, more security measures that need to be implemented to ensure that we're protecting corporate data. So, that will be another arena that organizations will need to navigate on their way to improving their security posture. So, like everything, different businesses have different levels of security investments that they've made in the past, and it's an evolution that companies are going through. So why don't we take a look at, the different types of organizations and their approaches. So really, as the pendulum swings, you've got organizations that are, on the unprepared, reactive stage. On the other end, you have proactive and anticipatory. What you'll find also on the proactive anticipatory side is, people that are actually using AI and some advanced security tools to stop zero-day threats. But, running through these line by line, the unprepared reactive people, they're investing in the bare minimum of tools, right? Checking the basic checkboxes. They've got antivirus. They've got a firewall in place. They've got basic VPN, for their remote users to be able to attach to those assets. Closing cybersecurity gaps as they are experienced, right? Jumping down to the last item, kind of playing whack-a-mole. They see a security issue, a user is impacted, they whack that mole, determine how to close that gap, but they're not looking holistically at the entire architecture where their risks of being exposed to are. Unaware of threats to the business, right? Just not keeping track of what threats are out there and how they could impact the business. No roadmap for improvement, right? IT is somewhat of maybe an afterthought. And when it comes to cybersecurity, it's a best effort approach and not a lot of investment. Kind of this we won't be targeted mentality, right? We're an SMB, we don't have important data. That's kind of a risky thought process that can stagnate your investments in cybersecurity. And then we move over to, more where we want to see organizations, right? They're concerned about the risks to their business. They're investing in tools, services to identify and remediate threats. They're identifying risk, closing gaps before a compromise, right? Not afterwards. They're threat aware and they're engaging their users, their tools, partners, and a whole ecosystem to be able to address and troubleshoot any security issues. They have a roadmap, right? Not only have they discussed this at a management level, but they've created plans to be able to close any future gaps and maintain, on a regular basis, a system security plan that kind of outlines what do they have closed and what's still open and when are they planning on working on it. And then the proactive anticipatory, they kind of have this mentality, it's only a matter of time, right? Whether it's, one of the weakest links in the security chain, a user clicking on the wrong link, maybe it's an infrastructure engineer that opened up the wrong port on a firewall, they kind of have a tool set to make sure that they're identifying intrusions onto their infrastructure, data that's being accessed inappropriately, those types of triggers that can create a response by a security operations center. And then these organizations, they're executing to a plan. Okay. So as we look at this, what are the risks of us not trying to get from that unprepared to an anticipatory? So cybersecurity gone wrong. Now, this is an average cost, and it includes very large enterprise all the way down to the SMB, right? But in 2020, the average cost of a breach is 3.86 million. And that includes kind of discovering that error, trying to trace an audit trail, what data did they take, potentially investing in various tools for individuals who've had their identity lost, disruption to business in the form of data loss, where instead of being able to restore content that was potentially encrypted, they're having to recreate a lot of that content. So despite this cost, I think a lot of us can agree that there is, a cost to a business disruption and data loss that if you're not moving across this continuum could impact you. The average time to identify a breach in 2020 was 207 days. So imagine somebody being on your network and being able to just take their time, monitor your email, monitor what's going on your local computer, be able to punch holes in your internal infrastructure and be able to move laterally. This just isn't appropriate for a business that's trying to protect their data. And then, on top of that 207 days, you've got roughly 73 additional days to identify and contain that breach, to make sure that threat actor that was in your network for all those days doesn't come back and doesn't have hooks across your infrastructure. And obviously that identification and containment is a part of that average cost of the data breach. And then just, continue to see an alarming rate of increases in the number of breaches since 2018, right, and 2014. And it's a trend we see going up, right? These threat actors have gotten money from ransomware attacks where people have paid them, phishing attacks. So it is becoming a very profitable industry for these threat actors. So, and then here's the graphical depiction of the cybersecurity maturity level across all of our organizations. So, I don't need to read this slide to you, but as we move from unaware, not investing, playing whack-a-mole, moving across that, we're a little bit more reactive. We've established some partners. Security Operations Center is involved. Proactive is, you've really got the tools in the toolbox. You're actively monitoring. Anticipatory brings you to that next level, right? It's, hey, we're anticipating this type of threat. We've got, these types of mechanisms to be able to identify that. Maybe it's a SIEM solution tied into a SOC with some type of automated remediation. And then, the next level, level 5, is above the graphic that I had shared before. And these are the companies, enterprises that are using artificial intelligence to do a better job at monitoring that movement and potential threat actors that become involved, right? And that 207 days that I was talking about on the prior slide, that's called dwell time. The neat thing about level 5 architectures is, that dwell time, they're trying to get it down to fractions of a second, right? So that person that comes into the network is immediately identified as a threat actor, and mechanisms are put in place to stop them from being able to move across the network. So now I've laid out, kind of where organizations are, and I'm sure each of you are kind of thinking now, where am I on this continuum? Let's shift the conversation though, because I really think it's important to kind of, how do we get you from number 1 all the way up to 5? So let's look at how we've helped at Elevity other organizations across this cybersecurity maturity level. First of all, any improvement that I've made, and I've spent many years on the other side of the desk for mid-enterprise organizations, anywhere from 650 up to 2,500 users. And I've always had a philosophy of continual improvement, right? And Peter Drucker had a great quote: "If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it," and it is so true. So my recommendation for anybody looking to improve their cybersecurity journey, maturity level, is to first start with an assessment. And this little bulleted list kind of walks through what I'm going to be covering at a more in-depth level. So first of all, you really want to assess the current state: systems, people, processes. You want to determine those security risks and the remediation efforts that are going to be needed to be able to close those. You're going to build a scoring matrix. So that scoring matrix is going to help you determine the next one, which is, what are those prioritized security initiatives that are going to be the most bang for your buck and cover the largest amount of attack vectors and risks? Then you're going to, be able to work within the organization, right? Maybe it's a budgeting cycle, board meetings, executive management reviews, but you really need to, attain the budgets necessary to be able to secure and generate consensus among leadership. And then, to my earlier point about it being a journey with no finish line, you got to revisit the plan, you got to reforecast, right, based off of current threats, and you're always going to have to rinse and repeat, right? Whether it's on a quarterly basis because you're maybe growing through a lot of acquisition activity, or maybe there's changes to the business model, organic growth. You're going to constantly want to assess and reassess any changes that you're making to your infrastructure to make sure that there's no weak links in your cybersecurity maturity. So let's start with that cybersecurity assessment, really the foundation of how you're going to measure your future improvement. So first of all, I'd select a framework to cover your assets. So there's a number of frameworks out there, and kind of the top three, sorted in order of kind of the ones that are highest percentage as far as performed for businesses across the nation. First of all, you've got the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. It's their cybersecurity framework. It is used by the Department of Defense. So if you're a contractor for the Department of Defense, I'm sure you've heard of the term NIST. They are right now in process of implementing CMMC, and that is Cybersecurity Maturity Model Compliance. Different levels, level 1 through 5. Level 3 is meeting this NIST standard. 4 and 5 implement new controls, and the next slide I'll kind of get into a little bit more depth on the controls, to be able to be for those, high tier supplier, Boeing, Raytheon, the different defense contractors. So very thorough, very broad at the different areas that it looks at. The other ones on the list, international standards and organizations. So a lot of manufacturers are very familiar with ISO. They have the ISO 27001, 27002 standards that a lot of organizations are being measured against. The Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls is another one that's out there that provides a broad array of tests for you to be able to look at. And then, of course, some of the compliance certifications, and there is a plethora of additional ones. But some of the main ones that we run across for our clients that we work with are PCI DSS and HIPAA compliance for healthcare. So let's take an in-depth look at the NIST assessment. It is something that we have a good deal of experience with at Alevity, and have helped some of our organizations not only assess their needs, but do a level of remediation. So on the left here, you'll see the NIST cybersecurity framework, and again, depicting kind of that never-ending journey, right? So it's really identifying what are those cybersecurity risks to your systems, people, asset, data, and your capabilities as an organization, and then coming up with that plan to protect them. Once you move past that, it's detecting any cybersecurity threats that are currently inside of your organization. How do you respond to those? How do you recover? And then how do you again go across that continuum of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover? All right. And then on the right here, there's a number of what NIST calls control areas. And there's 14 control areas that are part of the NIST assessment, with 110 different individual controls that need to be assessed. And when we provide the NIST assessment, we go through each of these interviews, reviewing policy, process, and procedure. We run scans across the network, internal vulnerability, external vulnerability, and really dig deep into people, processes, and systems to give you kind of a scorecard of where those gaps are that you should be focusing in on a business. And then executing that security assessment. So, first of all, yes, NIST makes available a lot of the different tools for being able to, do your own analysis and investigation. What I've found when I was on the other side of the desk, as well as in my solution architect role for Alevity, is that there's a great deal of pride that IT staff takes in their work. And out of that pride, is somewhat of a bias on the current security position. So my recommendation is, look for a partner that you trust to be able to come in and not trust your assumptions, right? But really challenge those internal IT people to be able to understand where those gaps are. Because again, back to Peter Drucker, if you're taking that measurement, that initial measurement, and that's going to be your basis for improvement, well, if you have hubris or bias that's interfering with that, that's going to interfere with your initial measurement and potentially your plans for improvements. So, and then that advanced discovery toolbox, right? I kind of talked about in the last slide some of the data discovery that we do. And that's, automated tools, looking at firmware updates, patching updates, looking at Active Directory to determine, password complexity. And so it just goes out there and it grabs all the environmental specifics that are going to potentially negatively impact your security posture. You also, if you're looking to bring in a partner, the good thing is they've got a broad perspective on the risks that you're facing and remediation approaches, right? It's not the remediation efforts aren't necessarily a one shoe fits all, and you have to do this. We learn from other organizations and, you know, a variety of different systems on better approaches that we can bring to the table to be able to help you. And then, you know, my other recommendation is a collaborative approach with internal staff. You know, positioning here will be absolutely critical. You have to have staff at all levels, management, information technology, executive staff. You know, it has to be security as a priority. And, you know, you have to ask those staff members, you know, they have to be fully transparent when we're going to do gap identification. Because again, if there's anything held back, then that'll kind of throw off your assessment and then your plans. And then you really want to make sure that you have deliverables, right? In a NIST assessment, what are those control area improvements? What are the remediation recommendations? You know, maybe it's multi-factor authentication. Maybe it's improved client security that reports up to a security operations center. You know, you want to kind of have an idea out of this assessment, those areas that you're weak and some avenues for being able to address them. And then of course, you know, what is the risk to the business? And how much effort is it going to take? You know, is it checking a checkbox on an Azure screen? Or is it completely redoing IP addresses and building VLANs and, you know, rebuilding your internal architecture, which can be quite a large effort. So some recommendations there. All right. And then after you've done the security assessment, it's time to take a lot of those gaps, organize them, and really start to get it to a place where we can build a roadmap. So the next slide.
Hey, Josh, I'll give you a chance to take a break and grab a quick drink of water. A question did come in that I want to throw your way.
Yeah,
if you're as from a client's perspective, how much time investment would you say is typical for them to consider? You know, obviously we do a bunch of the heavy lifting, but we do need their involvement and their input. And so what kind of time investment is typically needed up to this point in this review and assessment from the client's perspective?
Yeah, so it depends greatly on, you know, the size and complexity of an organization. But I would say that, you know, the initial investment from a partner coming in to do this assessment, because there is a level of, you know, having to be thorough as you know, look under all the rocks and find all these gaps. I would probably say something would start in the 24-hour range. Probably an organizational energy. So if you do have IT staff, I would say probably 8 to 12 hours of your staff's time through interviews, providing policy, procedure, org charts, network maps, network inventory, that kind of stuff. And then so starts at 24 for probably an SMB. And then, you know, mid-market is going to obviously creep up as the size and the complexity of the organization gets larger. So what we tend to do is come to the table, meet with the customer, determine, you know, number of users, number of systems, applications, number of sites, and that kind of drives cost. So was there another part to that question, Jeff?
It was just really the time, but if the question asker has more to follow up on, please submit that through the Q&A and I will pose it to you.
Great. Thank you very much. It also allowed me to take a sip of my seltzer water. Greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And then, so we have the outputs from the security assessment, and it's time to really create a scoring matrix. So what I found to be successful is, you know, identifying the key determinants of scoring matrix for security initiatives. Each business is different. You might have some other key determinants, but these are the ones that I've found most most valuable when trying to present to executive management. So they are, cost. You want to understand, capital outlay. Is it hardware that you need to buy? New firewalls, new switches, new access points, new mobile devices, laptops, desktops. Or is it potentially an operating cost, where you're paying a monthly service charge for a security operations center or something like that? What is the change effort, right? Like I said before, in some of these, it might be a week long duration, with some pretty simple tasks without any user interference. But there might be some others that are, things that have to happen on a weekend that are potentially user facing and could interrupt business cycles. So it's careful that you really take a look at that change effort and outline what it's going to take. Risk to the business, right? Some of these security threats, are minimized, mitigated. They're not very large threats to the data. So why would you jump through hoops on a 3-month project investment to close something that the business leaders don't really feel is a risk? New tools, do you have the right tools in the toolbox? Do you need to kind of go out to market, purchase new tools, or potentially invest in new partnerships? When you look at the portfolio of partnerships that you've already made as an organization, potentially it's time to test the waters with a new managed security service provider. And that should be identified as a key determinant in scoring as well. So list remediation initiatives, right? So list everything that was determined from that assessment in your gap report. Capture scores for each initiative. Making sure that you allocate enough time in this process to identify accurate costs and partnerships and timeframes. And then, sitting back, what are your recommendations, potentially partnering with the company that did the assessment to organize those initiatives into a 1 to 3 year plan? So now you've had the assessment, you had an external party kind of look at your infrastructure, give you those areas of improvement. You've taken those initiatives that are going to help you get closer to the finish line and at least further down the line on your journey. And now it's time to really, come to the executive staff, come to the management staff, maybe a board of directors, depends on your organization, and present those assessment results. And in the process, it's important to educate executive management, right? You can do this. Market research on threats really work. Past case studies of organizations that have moved across the continuum, potentially a little bit of scare tactics to help grease the wheels a little bit. And, if you're working with executive management, they understand to a certain extent, right? They see it on the news, whether it was the SolarWinds attack or, HVAC systems over at Target that brought somebody into the back door, or, they've heard it through their networking groups where, a CFO was phished and, sent $45,000, abroad to an unknown threat actor. So, be careful on the fear tactics. Is kind of my recommendation, but definitely point out that there is risk out there. Present recommendations for planned initiatives, right? It's always important to come to the table with your recommendations, but be open-minded. You want to collect input from them as well on their thoughts about the risk. That plan that you're presenting, you want to make sure that you include timing, what are the costs, and what risks are you going to be remediating? And then, out of that meeting, build consensus on a go forward plan. It might not all be contained in a single meeting. You might have to present the information, let them process it, come back to the table and do some whiteboard sessions to figure out the order and what initiatives that you want to take on. And then, of course, cybersecurity initiatives, they cost money. So making sure that you have that discussion about budget dollars and the allocation of that towards cybersecurity projects. And then another key point here, what are we not doing, right? It's equally as important that they agree with what you're doing, but it's important, very important to say, we still have risks in these areas and we've agreed to not address these. That way there's transparency, and you can move forward together, assuming those risks, monitoring them, and keeping them at the forefront for future planning. So now we've done the management review, and we're ready to continue our journey to improving our cybersecurity posture. So I've said it so many times in this session. I'll just do it one more time, hopefully the last time. There is no finish line with improving cybersecurity posture. There is no top end of the amount of money that you can spend, right, while you're chasing these things. So take a reasonable, metered approach to addressing these security risks over a period of time. Really addressing those, in a stoplight reporting, green, yellow, red, really taking care of those reds that are a concern, high risk first, but continuing to invest to cover up the needs improvement areas. Regular planned risk assessment and security assessments. So with that ever-changing landscape of threats, and kind of jumping down to the next bullet point, when new risks come to market, you got to see how is that impacting your security posture. And with a quarterly, biannually review of both those risks and the security assessment, you can kind of adjust your plan to account for new activity in that cybersecurity landscape. And then, part of that assessment ongoing is not only, what's going on in the threat landscape, but also what new tools are out there, right? There is a lot of investment that security organizations are making to build that better mousetrap. And, over the course of, a year, there could be pretty significant changes in those tools. So be aware of those, constantly be vigilant, avoid complacency, and make sure that you're investing the time to stay on top of your cybersecurity posture, and not let things slide and risks present themselves in the event that you do get complacent. So that is my recommendation for the organizations that I work with on, kind of getting through these improvements and moving across the continuum of cybersecurity maturity. So, I would be remiss if I didn't say, and not to make this a sales pitch, but Levity does do a good deal of work with our organizations that we work with. What can we do to help you? Reach out. We'd love to talk to you and help you with that cybersecurity maturity journey. So execute NIST cybersecurity assessment services. We can provide those, giving you those gaps, recommendations for remediation. We can also do managed security services for proactive management across your business. So, Is it that advanced client security that's reporting into a SOC, and when an issue is addressed or identified 24/7, there can be a remediation and a response after hours, because these threat actors don't just have 8 to 5 jobs. So, and then, all of our VCIOs, both myself and my counterpart, Peter Niebler, we're very security-minded VCIOs, and can help you not only with that handoff of the assessment, but also working inside of your organization to provide strategic thought leadership, right? Here are what we think the initiatives are. Here's what we think the costs are, and be able to have those discussions with your executive management to help facilitate, more of an investment and a protection for your business. So, and with that, I wanted to thank everybody. Don't worry, it's not over yet. We've got a chance to win an Amazon gift card. And with that, I wanted to thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. Hopefully you found the session insightful and valuable. And Jeff, if you don't mind, I'll hand it over to you for the wrap up. And if we want to finish with some Q&A, I'd be happy to hang around. Okay.
Great. Yeah, and if you do have any kind of final questions, please get those into the Q&A section here soon, and we'll get those asked. But we do want to hear from you on how you feel that this session went, and whether it was valuable content. We put a lot of time and effort into trying to determine what you find valuable. A lot of that is measured on how many people attend the events, but just attending doesn't necessarily reflect if you took good information out of it. So we do have a easy, quick little way to fill out a survey. You can either type in that long email address or long web address, or you can take your phone and hover it over the screen in that QR code. My favorite Mexican restaurant, little local place, has us use this for menus, so they don't have to print paper ones and throw them away. So it's really worked out pretty well. But turn your camera on your phone and just point it at this QR code, and a little pop-up should kind of slide down from the top that says, open this, open this link or whatever, and it should take you to a survey. Few questions, shouldn't take long. And for those that do complete it, we're going to send you a $20 Amazon gift card to be used for whatever you'd like. So I'll leave that up here just for a couple more seconds in case anybody is trying to type out that URL. Of course, you could screen grab this as well if you would like. And it doesn't look like any other questions have come in. So if there is anything that we can do, if this is interesting to you, or you feel that this is the right time to start moving in this direction, you can let us know that by going to levityit.com/risk. There's a free cybersecurity risk assessment, and then we will follow up with you once you've completed that to talk about any specific areas of concern, need, compliance, timelines, anything like that we can help with. So levityit.com/risk to let us know, or to do a quick little assessment, and then obviously we'll be in touch to follow up on that. If you prefer to not follow any of those paths, you can always talk to your account manager, to your VCIO, to your service delivery specialist, to anyone at Levity, and we'd be happy to either connect you to the right people or answer your questions if we can. Again, cybersecurity is such an important thing from a business continuity perspective today. Everyone needs to be taking the right steps and measures that are appropriate for your business, and make sure that you can continue to do business the way that you need to, and grow things as your plans dictate. So Josh, thanks again for your time and effort in presenting. I thought it was a lot of great content, and thanks everyone for attending. We look forward to talking to you more. Have a great day.
Appreciate it. Have a good day, everybody.